Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry about that. Good afternoon. This is Mackie Dykes with the Connecticut Green Bank. We'll be starting momentarily. We've got a few other folks joining. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today on our Green Bank financing programs and the new non-residential solar tariff. Just a few announcements before we get started. We will be recording this and we'll be circulating a copy probably later this week. We'll also have Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, please just, you should have a Q&A box over in the control panel to your right. Please type those in and we will get to those at the end of the webinar. All right, let's jump in. Next slide. So real quick, we've got a lot of new folks on this call that I haven't worked with in the past, which is fantastic to see. So I wanted to just take a second to talk about who we are. So the Connecticut Green Bank, we're the nation's first green bank, established back in 2011. We're a quasi-public agency, so started by the state. We receive state funding as well as private dollars, and work to drive investment into Connecticut's clean energy economy. Next slide. We offer solutions really across a suite of markets and sectors, all the way from small home loans for a few $1,000s for insulation, all the way up to sort of large scale, grid scale, and investment solutions where we partner with private investors. And then in between our building solutions program, which is what we'll be focused on today on the non-residential side, bringing different solar financing to businesses, nonprofits, municipalities, and state agencies. Next slide. So today we'll talk a little bit about the non-residential solar tariff, what we know, what we don't know, and then talk through its impact on the existing Green Bank products. CPACE, we'll go a little more in depth on CPACE today than the PPA. We hope to have a follow-up webinar in the near future on really getting into project examples with the PPA. And then a new product we're rolling out, the solar roof lease. Sort of tease our energy storage program that's coming, and then we'll have questions at the end. Next slide. All right, let's dig into the tariff a little bit. So I think a lot of you are probably familiar with what we've been dealing with for the last 10 years, the ZREC LREC program combined with net metering. The non-residential tariff is designed to be the successor to that sort of regime we've been living under. It's going to offer two different compensation options for the RECs and electricity. We'll dig into those tariffs and those two options in a minute, but it'll be 20-year tariff terms. And these tariffs will be awarded in reverse auctions, which will be held twice a year. Starting the first year, it'll just be once a year, but for the rest of the program, they'll be twice a year, except for the small size class, which, similar to ZRECs, will be awarded through that process. And the projects for the tariff, they will be sized to meet the on-site demand. And there will be virtual net metering options available for state, agricultural, and municipal properties where you can size larger to either on-site load, or if you don't have a load on-site, and virtually meter the credits to other eligible facilities. Next slide. So let's jump in on the options that are available. The first is a netting tariff, which is actually very similar to net metering, with actually, I think, some slight improvements in terms of the customer economics. So the energy production from the generation will be netted against the on-site usage on a monthly basis. So again, very similar. You're able to consume what you produce on site, and then what you don't use on a monthly basis is sold back to the grid, and it'll be compensated at the retail rate. The two key differences from the net metering that we're moving away from to this netting tariff is, one, that monthly rollover now will be $1 credit rather than a kilowatt hour. And I think most importantly, that any excess production is cashed out at a wholesale, right? So, in the past, you could sort of roll credits forward for on a month-to-month basis, but in a year, if your production exceeded your demand, you received wholesale rate for any of that excess production. Now, it'll always be compensated at the retail rate. Every month, they'll do that netting, and any excess will be rolled over all the way until the end of the 20-year term. So we never have to worry about that overproduction on site. I mean, we're still limited in terms of our sizing to the on-site demand. So it's not a lot of opportunity to overproduce on a large scale basis. But again, we just don't have to worry about the customer being underwater if their usage decreases. On the REC side, again, fairly similar to the LREC ZREC structure, with I think slight improvements for the customer. We'll have fixed REC terms or payments that'll be made. They'll be off the electric bill, and like ZRECs, they can be assigned to a third party. Except now, instead of a 15-year REC term like we have with ZRECs, we've got the REC term goes for the full length of the tariff. So we don't have 20 years of a fixed REC revenue stream. For the auction, since your electricity compensation is just tied to the retail rate, you're only going to be bidding in a REC rate. So it'll just be one number. Then on the buy-all side, this is fairly simple tariff, very similar to a power purchase agreement or a feed-in tariff. This is just the bundling together the electricity and the RECs and selling those at a fixed price for the 20-year term, and that's fixed with in terms of no escalation or anything. So you bid in the bundled purchase price, and that's what you get for every kilowatt hour for the 20 years. And those payments can be fully assigned to a third party. Next slide. So those are the two tariff options. There is a limited capacity of how many projects can receive those tariffs. So there will be a procurement run to figure out which projects get those tariffs. This structure is, again, pretty similar to the LREC-ZREC program with some slight changes. We do have two sort of overall technology buckets: the low emission project, so it's sort of the LREC successor, and then we have we have zero emission projects, which is further broken into three size categories: small, medium, and large. Again, very similar to the ZREC. I think the key differences here are one on the sizing. On the zero emission side of things, the buckets are a little different. And unlike ZREC, which capped projects at 1 megawatt, we can now go up to 2 megawatts. So you see on the project size the scales of the different ones. And then unlike LREC-ZREC, where there was the program was it was dollars that the utilities were awarding. Now it's capacity that they're awarding. So all in, you've got 10 megawatts on the low emission side and 50 megawatts on the zero emission side. And you see the breakdowns here in terms of the utilities and the size classes for what they'll be awarding in the auctions. Then in year one, and sorry, as I mentioned earlier, these they'll be running, again, very similar to LREC-ZREC, reverse auctions to award these projects. So the first procurement will happen in early 2022, February 1st, and closing March 14th. Everyone, all this is always subject to change, but the final decision by Pura a few weeks ago, those were the dates. Always keep an eye on these to make sure they don't change. And then in year two and beyond, there'll actually be two annual auctions. They'll sort of break the capacity into those two different ones. So we'll see more opportunities to win projects in the starting in year two. Next slide. A few other points on the procurement. There is a price cap, which you see here for the buy-all bids and then the netting bids. There are also bid preferences for landfills or brownfields, as well as for projects located in distressed municipalities. So what that means is, let's say, just keep it simple, you bid in a $100 per megawatt hour buy-all bid. When they're evaluating your bid against other projects, let's say if you're in a distressed municipality, the value of your bid will actually be discounted by 20%. So it'll be, even though you would receive $100 per kilowatt hour if you win, if you're compared to a $90 bid, you would win because yours is discounted 20%. So you're valued at 80 for terms of the auction. Next slide. And as I alluded to earlier, the small zero emission projects will be that award process will be very similar to how small ZRECs operated in the past. As opposed to the reverse auction, the rates will be administratively set, and then we'll have that same award process. There'll be a 2-week window where you can apply, and then any projects that come in during that window will be awarded by a lottery. If there's not enough project applications to use all the available capacity in that particular auction, then it'll just be opened up on a first come, first served basis. And then in the table here, you see what the year one small zero emission project rates are set at. So just over $200, just over 20 cents on the buy-all rate, and then 95 for just the REC on the netting tariff. Next slide. And one thing just to call out, I know this is a webinar, the non-residential tariff, but affordable multifamily properties. There was a law passed in the last legislative session that shifted these properties from the non-residential tariff to the residential tariff, which I think there's a lot of benefits to this for these properties. The residential tariff, I mean, big thing is that it's uncapped. So, we were talking about 50 megawatts of solar and 10 megawatts of low emission projects on the non-residential side. There is no cap on the residential side. It's a fixed rate, which in many cases will be higher than the non-residential tariff. So that there's the other benefit is you're likely to receive more revenue for these for projects on these properties due to their eligibility under the residential tariff. And then I think one other important benefit is you'll be able to aggregate all the demand on site. Assuming, say, tenants all have their own meters, you got a common space meter, you'll be able to combine all that and build one project behind one meter. So it's almost, and then all the tenants per the law will have to share in the benefits from that project. So you can almost think of it as like on-site community solar. There's still a process that needs to be run to exactly define what affordable is. So which projects will fit into this bucket and receive this treatment, and then also specifically how the benefits will be shared. For instance, will they be distributed on the electric bill? Will there have to be payments outside of that? We just don't know yet. So that'll all be defined through a proceeding that PURA seems to be signaling based on some outreach we're seeing that they're going to be opening up soon. All right, next slide. All right, so that's the sort of high level on the tariff, and we could spend the rest of this webinar and probably a few more hours on the intricacies of it. But at a high level, that's how it works. So let's talk about how it will relate to the existing Green Bank solar products. So first is CPACE. Just real quick on CPACE, Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy. This has been an incredibly successful tool for deploying solar in the state. It's financing available to commercial properties for clean energy upgrades, which includes any on-site renewable generation. Provides 100% financing for up to 25 years at a fixed rate, which is then repaid through a senior assessment on the property, which stays with that property regardless of ownership. So if you sell the building, the solar is going to stay with it. So the obligation to pay for CPACE will transfer with the building as well. So the ability to offer 25-year financing, or typically with solar, we see 20-year terms. The ability to offer that fairly low cost financing for 20 years allows us to create scenarios where we're stretching the repayments out to such an extent that the revenue from the solar project exceeds the servicing the debt. So you're cash flow positive from day one and typically throughout the entire term. So the value proposition to customers is fantastic. It's really with no money out of pocket, they're freeing up cash flows or creating additional cash flows from their property. So great tool. Is it going to work under the new tariff? Next slide. So let's look at just a project. So let's take an Eversource customer who's on rate 30. So based on the calculator, the auction bid comparison calculator the utilities put out, we use the electric cost from that. So they're at 0.097. I'm going to use a 2.5% escalator, and assume the property owner is they're going to use CPACE to buy their system. They've got tax liability, so they're going to be able to monetize all the tax credits. And then on the project side, I picked a project that would in the past have been a medium ZREC, just right on the edge, and going to produce 375,000 kilowatt hours, so fairly decent capacity factor there. And then it's a decent build cost, $2 a watt, 674,000. So what does this project look like financed through CPACE through both of the tariffs? So I think that all the project characteristics here are the same. So the key difference is going to be, well, what's the value of the tariff that you're getting? So in order to make this comparison, I think it's important to make sure that those tariffs are essentially equal. So how do we make them equal? Well, I figured we'd look at it from the perspective of the auction, and let's get two. Let's pick two tariff compensation numbers that would be evaluated equally through that auction. So they tie essentially if they were both bid in, and they needed to be selected. And let's take. And I also wanted to sort of take something we were all familiar with in terms of the economics and the sort of the old regime. So if you'll look at the netting tariff line here in the third table, so this is rate 30. So I pulled this right from the utilities calculator on bid comparison. We could again spend a bunch of time on how they're arriving at the value of the electricity there in the NPV retail rate, but that is what it is. That's fixed. I think an $80 medium ZREC bid is fairly reasonable, maybe a little rich in the later auctions, but we certainly see those. So I picked we got a bid price here of just under $80, just so we ended up with even numbers at the end. So, again, I think this is a pretty typical project that we would see under LREC ZREC. So that evaluated bid price in the new tariff auction would equal, assuming no bid preference, would equal $197 per megawatt hour. So on the buy all side, to make it comparable, that I just used that number. So again, this is, I think, a fairly typical what would have been a medium ZREC project for the customer on rate 30. Let's see what the CPACE economics look like now. So if you go to the next slide. So on the buy all slide, or buy all case, so again, this is $197 per megawatt hour. So again, it's a fairly simple calculation. On the top here on the inflow side, all we're doing is taking the annual generation, 375,000, or multiplying it times that buy all bid, and you're getting your tariff revenue line for. I only did just the first 10 years here to spare everyone's eyes, and then we're assuming the building owner is taking all the tax credits in year one. And then when you look at the PACE payments, this is a 20-year PACE term at 5.75%. As you can see, we're able to present the customer with a very attractive value proposition here. Those of you who work with CPACE are probably familiar with the SIR calculation. So this yields a 1.453 SIR, which is pretty healthy. So that's the ratio of the savings to investment. And as you can see in the annual net cash flow line, they are cash flow positive in every year. So their tariff revenue, which again, this is bundled electricity and RECs, is exceeding what they're paying back to the green bank on their PACE payments. So I think the buy all value is a strong one, and it's a very simple conversation to have with a customer, especially when paired with CPACE. Let's go to the next slide. So the netting, again, this is pretty similar to what our SAR calculator looked like for net metering. So you've got your electricity revenue there on the inflows. So this is just really the avoided electricity cost at their retail rate. Again, the rate is escalating over time, so it's slightly going up, and we don't really have to worry about whether they're exporting or anything, because it's all compensated whether it's consumed immediately or banked. It's all going to be compensated at the retail rate. You've separately got the REC revenue here, so you see that revenue going out, and again, I don't have it all here, but you see a full 20 years of REC revenue. And then we got the tax benefits, and the slight, I think, as you'd expect, this is a slightly healthier economic situation for the customer, just because they're capturing uh, the rising, the avoided energy value is going up as their retail electricity rate escalates over time. So you're able to capture slightly higher benefits here with the netting tariff. And again, we could spend a lot of time talking about bid strategy and what's going to be able to win. Yeah, but again, that really what would have been a typical medium ZREC project in the past. This, clearly it's actually slightly healthier. I ran the numbers on the old calculator, as you'd expect, with 5 more years of rec revenue. It's better economics than an old medium ZREC. So I think really the takeaway here is the CPACE product will continue to be a very strong tool to helping customers that have tax liability purchase solar. The netting scenario, it's really going to be similar to I think the conversation around net metering, just maybe a little stronger because we have more rec revenue. And then the buy-all maybe is not much as upside, but I think it's just a much simpler conversation given the pretty basic structure of that. Next slide. All right, so that was CPACE. Let's talk just very quickly about our power purchase agreement. Really no major changes to the Green Bank PPA. Given the similarity to net metering of the new regime, this is going to work. Right? Really, the big benefit is that since we don't have to worry about any electricity ever being sold at the wholesale rate, we can size. The Green Bank had previously restricted our projects to offset at 85% annual usage because we never wanted overproduction. That's really not a worry anymore. So we won't have that restriction in place, and we'll build to as big as the program will let us. We will be following up. We'll have another webinar to do some more in-depth project examples and some comparisons with our new product, which we'll talk about in just a second. But just for today, just wanted to give this sort of high level. Next slide. And that brings us to our new product that we're rolling out, a solar roof lease. Next slide. So how will this work? It'll be similar to a PPA in the sense that the Green Bank and our partners will be the system owner, so still will be third-party owned. But in this case, we'll utilize the buy-all tariff, and the Green Bank will just directly, will directly sell all the power as the system owner to the utility, and the buy-all tariff, which is fully assignable, that revenue will be assigned 100% to the Green Bank. So the energy and rec transaction will occur just between the Green Bank and the utility. And then with the customer, us as the system owner, we'll pay just a roof lease to that customer. So they won't see anything on their electric bill, they won't be consuming any of the power or anything. From their perspective, it's just, they're now monetizing a portion of their building that they weren't able to before. The roof, they're getting a tenant on their roof, similar to like a cell tower or something like that. Next slide. So just, as I mentioned, we'll have another webinar where we really dive into the PPA versus the roof lease, the economics of the two. But at a high level, how to think about the similarities and differences. Really both allow you to go solar and help the environment, and to do it in a similar way in that there's no upfront cost. You don't own the system, so you have O&M responsibility. Green Bank and our partners have that. Both of these will continue to be a good way for those without tax liability to go solar. Just a third-party ownership structure is typically the best way to go. The differences, the roof lease, it's really just a a new income stream. Again, it's just like a tenant on their roof, and it's completely independent of system performance. So under PPA, I mean, used to say they really don't have production risk, but when compared to a roof lease, they do have production risk in the sense that if the system's not working, they don't get the savings that they thought they would have. Under a roof lease, they really have no risk because they're going to get that lease payment no matter what. So, it really it's sort of a you don't even have to think about it way to go solar and then and provide some certainty in the revenue stream. Given the fact that we're not dependent on the building owner to pay us like under a PPA, we don't have credit requirements or financial writing for a roof lease. We also don't need CPACE to secure a roof lease like we do with many PPAs. So, for those two reasons, as well as just you don't have to get into explaining net metering or a netting tariff and what a RECA, all that stuff. The roof lease is just much more simpler and faster. Now, I think with a PPA, they'll still have folks attracted to that. For many cases, you'll have higher financial upside under a PPA, and there's something to be said for just feeling like you're reducing your own usage. You're producing your own electricity, and it reduces electricity cost actually on the bill. So I think there'll be some customers interested in each one, but these are just some of the key differences between the two. And again, we'll spend some more time in a future webinar really diving into the numbers. Next slide. So I want to do a real quick teaser. For those of you that haven't heard, Pura has created a battery storage incentive program. The Green Bank and the utilities will be co-administrators of this program, Energy Storage Solutions. Very exciting. It's going to hopefully be the catalyst for a huge market. We'll be doing a webinar on Thursday, December 16th, that'll give an overview of the program. So I really hope that everyone can join for that. Next slide. And I think with that, we are done. Yep. So I'll pause there and turn it over. I'm joined by Fiona Stewart and Elise Puzelli from the Green Bank. They're going to help with questions. So let me turn it over to our moderator, Rob Smith, to go through any questions you might have.
All right, great. So I see a couple questions coming through. If you guys do have any more questions, please submit those through either the chat feature or you can submit those through the question feature on GoToWebinar. So let's go ahead and jump into some of these. The first one here is asking about landfills and distressed municipalities, whether these would be sites that might be eligible for the tariff and any of the financing options.
Yes. I mean, as with any project we do, we would have to, underwrite the particulars of it. But generally, from a financing perspective, it certainly would be eligible. And then clearly, I should say the Green Bank is not the administrator of the tariff program, so it can't represent the utilities with sort of official answers on that. But from a tariff perspective, I think they've clearly indicated in the procurement plan that those properties not only are eligible but get these bid preferences.
All right, great. Another question
and
here.
One other, I forgot to mention, the calculators that I was showing for each of the tariff options, we will be making those available in the next week or so that y'all can use those to run projects and show them to customers.
Great. Another question here for the buy all, is this maxed at usage on site?
Yes, it is. I mean, unless it's a virtual net meter project where you've got beneficial accounts that you can serve, in which case it would be limited to the overall load of those accounts. But other than that, yeah, you're for both tariff options, you're limited to the on-site demand.
Okay, and on the netting option, will T and D non-demand be reimbursed on a one-to-one credit?
One more time, please. Repeat that.
On the netting option, will the T and D for non-demand be reimbursed on a one-to-one credit?
If I believe I'm understanding the question correctly, and again, I can't officially represent the utilities, but my understanding is T&D or any other charges that are kilowatt hour based will be built into that compensation price. So yes, would be compensated at whatever the kilowatt hour rate is for those.
If someone were to elect the sell all tariff, is the system size limited to site load?
Yep.
Is there any aspect of the roof lease payment that could prevent a taxable event for the building owner, and how is this going to work for nonprofits?
Good question. Don't have an answer to that yet. We're still in the process of drafting up our the lease itself and thinking through some of those implications. So it's a great question, and one we'll be able to answer as we further develop the actual documents.
A question here about the roof lease program and how that's going to work for a property owner. The customer will still have a utility bill obligation, but essentially, are they using the lease payment to offset their utility bill, or can we think of it in this way?
I don't think so. I really don't think they'll see any impact on their electric bill at all, because the solar revenue, the buy all revenue, will be 100% assigned to us as the system owner. So all that compensation will sort of flow. The building owner won't see any of that. That's how we can stay away from any financial underwriting, because the building owner has no payment obligation. So yeah, they won't see really any impact on their electric bill. What they'll see is a separate check from us for renting their roof or their ground or whatever for the solar.
Another question here about how the netting tariff works. Will electricity being exported to the grid be calculated in real time or at month's end by subtracting total consumption from total production?
I'm sorry, I had some issues. You'll have to either repeat it, or Fiona or Elise, if y'all could jump in.
Yeah, so to repeat the question, under the netting tariff, the question is, will we be seeing the electricity exported to the grid calculated in real time, or will that be at month's end by subtracting total consumption from total production?
I think the question's better directed to the utilities. I believe it's the latter, but I can't say for sure as we're not the administrator.
For the roof lease, do we know if a new EDC contract is available yet?
We are currently working on all of the documentation for the roof lease, including on the EPC side and on what would be with the site owner.
Great, thanks, Fiona. Question on the tariffs here. Are the total megawatt values procured each year applicable to both netting and buy all, or are there separate procurements for each tariff? We still have you, Mackie?
Sorry, Fiona here. It's applicable to both. Apologies, I was talking on mute.
There we go. Sorry, I couldn't unmute. Yeah, that's correct. They're both bidding into the same auction.
Mhm.
So bidding or netting and buy all bids will compete against each other for that same capacity.
Great. Just a reminder, keep sending those questions in. We're coming towards the bottom of the list, but we've still got plenty of time here. Just a question, if we have any insight into the way bids are viewed preferentially, if there's any advantage to, say, a rooftop site versus an agricultural site, or if there's differences between brownfields or other types of sites.
I think the bid preferences will be the only preferential treatment that's given. So yeah, brownfields and landfills will receive that. So they would be viewed, if you get a project that's bid in that's on a landfill and a project that's bid in that's not on a landfill, and they both have the same bid, the one on the landfill would win because of the bid preference. There's not one for agricultural facilities, so nothing there. It would just be valued at whatever, whatever the number is. Now, the utilities actually, in terms of figuring out the sort of how the utilities will value your bid, they put a great calculator out, which actually we can include in the materials when we send it out. So that's where I pulled that last table on my project example slide. So with that, you'll be able to tinker with, if I do a netting bid with this rec bid, how would it be compared to a buy all bid at this rate? So you can, kind of zero in on what you think will be a competitive bid. So Pura sent that out yesterday, I believe, but we'll include it in the materials we send out so everyone has it.
Great. For sites with multiple meters and/or accounts, will the on-site demand for a single solar array be based on the aggregate of all the on-site accounts or just the single largest account?
So you can, a nice feature is we can aggregate. If there's multiple accounts on one site, you are able to aggregate them, their load, and then build behind, interconnect behind one of the meters. The only restriction there is you have to use the buy all tariff for that.
Question here is specific to how the Green Bank will offer our roof leases. Will we be offering any prepaid roof leases?
I doubt it. We can talk about that if you think if folks think there'd be customer interest in that. But to be honest, on our end, the thing we worry about there is then there's really, if we pay them everything up front, then there's no, we have no clause if they decide to, build another, add an addition or something that's going to fully shade our system and decrease production, or they're going to basically do anything that's detrimental to the production that voids the contract or brings penalties to the table. We don't have any leverage because we've paid out everything. Plus the value would just be lower if we have to pay it out up front. So those are the challenges we were dealing with as we thought about it. But I think there's a lot of interest in that, it's certainly a conversation we'd want to have.
Great. A couple questions here about system sizing, first on something like a landfill where presumably there may not be a load, how are we looking to measure site load for the purposes of system sizing? And are there any methodologies for increasing size to meet anticipated future use?
All right, so on the first, again, we're not the administrator of the program. It's better directed to them, but based on my read of it, so you don't have to have, as long as it qualifies under V&M. So if it's a muni, state, or ag property, you don't have to have any on-site load. You can, it's just a matter of getting eligible beneficial accounts, so muni, state, or ag accounts, and then basing your sizing on those account demands. So again, yes, it's possible. You're sizing to other eligible account loads that would get the credits. And then what was the second question, Rob?
If there's any methodologies for increasing size of system to meet future use or anticipated future use.
Yes, there is the beneficial electrification provision where I just encourage you to look at the actual documents on this, but there are ways to, if you expect transportation electrification or heating electrification, to oversize the system in anticipation of that materializing in the next few years.
Right. Question here about existing ZREC contracts. Is there any way to add capacity under the new program?
Not sure I completely understand. Add capacity in the sense of add to a particular project that has a ZREC to make it bigger as they're adding capacity. I think once you build that, you can then come and add more, like essentially get a tariff for additional solar or generation on that property. If I'm recalling correctly, if you're adding capacity to where there's already existing solar under ZREC, I believe it might have to be under the buy-all tariff, but I could be wrong there. But yeah, assuming I'm understanding the question correctly, yeah, I think you can add some later once you fulfill the ZREC contract.
Great. A couple questions here on the virtual net metering program. Is that simply a add-on to the buy-all and netting tariffs, or are there other features of that override other parts of the incentive structure?
I think it's really just an add-on. It's just, you're able to essentially add additional, build to serve additional load that doesn't have to be on site. So you can build a bigger system, generate more revenue, and then assign it to those eligible accounts, either based on picking a netting tariff or a buy-all tariff. So yeah, I don't think it's overriding anything else or anything.
Right. The last question we have in the queue here is regarding the affordable multifamily program. Where can folks go to learn more about that and any more information on how that interacts with the tariffs?
So the residential tariff, which that's what they'll be taking advantage of. They've run a whole proceeding on setting those values and sort of how it's going to operate. So I don't have that docket number at my fingertips, but we could include that when we send information out. And that would be where you could go to learn how the residential tariff works, what the value is. Over there, again, it's similar. You'll have a netting option, a buy-all option, but those rates will be set. In terms of the intricacies of what's affordable and how the benefits will be shared, the Bureau will be opening up a proceeding on that. We don't yet know when or what the docket number will be, so can't point to anything there yet. But we can make it available once we're aware. It's send it out to all our contractor list.
Great. So we don't see any further questions here. But again, we will make sure to distribute this webinar and post it on our website and share it with everyone. And if there are any more questions, everybody can respond to that email where we distribute that or contact us in any way.
Yeah, and just again, thanks everyone for joining. We're excited about this transition. We think solar is still going to be very attractive for business owners, and we think our tools, our financing tools, will make going solar even more attractive. We'll be getting this calculator out, CPACE calculator out, so you can use it. And as I mentioned, we'll have a follow-up webinar to really dive into the roof lease and the PPA under the new tariff. So thanks again.